I'm always excited to be part of this wonderful conference, which now dates back probably about 20 years, and I think I've been to almost all of these summits. They're very important. India is very important. TERI is very important. You, ladies and gentlemen, are very important because you are all champions of sustainable development. And we need champions because we're not winning this battle. We're really in a very difficult situation. Unlike many human efforts, we have a real time limit. For many things that we aspire to do on the planet, to be good, to reduce poverty, to accomplish other noble causes, we know that we struggle year by year at these problems, and we feel that we're making progress and somehow we will get things accomplished. When it comes to the challenges that are before us, whether it's the oceans, as the ambassador just noted, or climate change, or indeed the risks of profound social instability in a world filled with nuclear weapons, we don't have time. And in fact, we face potentially disastrous irreversibilities. That's what makes this problem different, in my view, from the other problems that we grapple with. We have to actually act, not only wish to act. And we have to do so at a speed which is completely uncharacteristic of our societies and with an extent of global cooperation which is basically unknown in human history. So I don't come with good news. I just come with my usual alarm and hope to spur in our discussion and in you new ways to make breakthroughs in a world that is very unsatisfactory in its leadership. How many leaders do we have under indictment or should be under indictment around the world? How bad is our politics? How much time do we waste in wars and killing each other rather than in working together to solve problems? The answer is, of course, too much. So for me, this is not quite catharsis, but brainstorming. What should we do? So I'll start with our situation today. And I think that the first of the big trends is why it's so important that we're all here. And that is that the world, after 2 centuries, is becoming an Asia-centered world economy again. Throughout most of human history, we only have even rudimentary estimates of this reality over the last 2,000 years, but for 1,800 of 2,000 years, Asia was the center of gravity of the world economy and certainly of the world's population. Because between India and China, the 2 giants of the world in population, we have always had close to half of the world's population. Asia's been home to roughly 2/3 of the world's population. And for most of human history, 2/3 of the world's population translated to 2/3 of the world economy as well. It was only with the emergence of industrialization that the, quote, Western world led, if you call it leadership. It's, of course, like Gandhi said when he was asked what did he think about Western civilization, he said it would be a good idea. And Western leadership would have been a good idea as well. But we had 2 centuries where the West was dominant in the world economy, and that's ending now. I think that's good because it means that India and China and other parts of Asia are basically narrowing technological gaps and living standard gaps that were very, very large, that were enlarged by imperial power and many other causes. And those gaps are narrowing, but they're by no means gone. It does mean, though, a kind of responsibility which is profound. India has to get this right, this question of sustainable development, not only for India, but for the whole world. Because now, as the world's, you will soon be the world's most populous economy, by mid-century, probably the world's largest economy, overtaking China, which will have a gradual decline of population. India, whether good or bad, will have a continuing rise of population till mid-century and onward, continued rapid economic growth. The future of the world's going to be made here. And so if India says, well, we're too poor, we've got too much coal, we can't really take this seriously, you wreck the whole world, not just India. So this is a responsibility that is actually very, very significant and very large. Of course, the same with China. If China is not absolutely responsible now in shifting from a highly polluting, highly coal-intensive economy to a clean economy, it's not just choking on the air in Beijing, it's the future of the climate system. It's not that the US and Europe are footnotes, but they are not the main story anymore. And they are the main story historically. So the US remains the main emitting country historically, and in per capita terms, far and away larger than India, almost 8 times, and roughly twice the per capita emissions of China. But for the future of the world, China and India absolutely have to get it right. And it's your turn. So this is a big story and a very big deal. Second, of course, is the reason we're here, is that we are hitting catastrophe. In so many environmental dimensions, we can barely keep track. Of course, global warming is one of the two most crucial of these, because global warming changes everything. Not only does it change the climate, it changes the ecology, it changes the biodiversity, it changes the crop productivity, it makes certain places uninhabitable, and it potentially will lead to several meters sea level rise on a scale of a century or two. The other trend that is equally significant is the loss of biodiversity, which has reached a catastrophic level because of the massive appropriation of land by our species, throwing off all the other species, telling them, we grow food for us, thank you, not for you, get away. And that's called farming and rangelands, and we've taken over more than half the planet in our land appropriation, and it's having catastrophic effects when you combine the land appropriation, of course, the deforestation and habitat change, with climate change and with chemical pollutants that go along with the land use, and with the water diversion. So these are the two great ecological challenges. But of course, there are many, many other environmental catastrophes underway. Ocean acidification, the ocean pollution that the ambassador just noted, the massive air pollution, which is probably the worst in India of the whole world now, and in this city is catastrophic. It is not safe to live here. It is not safe to raise children here with this level of pollution. So this isn't a matter of we're too poor to do something about it. You've got to do something about it. You do not want your kids growing up in 15 years of miserable air quality. It's bad for the brains, bad for the lungs, bad for the health, bad for the productivity. So there are many planetary boundaries that we're hitting. And understand this is a scale challenge. India's population since the beginning of the 19th century has gone up 7 times. The estimate is about 200 million people living in India, in present-day borders of India, as of 1820, and now nearly 1.4 billion people, on the way to about 1.7 billion peak. The world population as a whole has increased from 1 billion to 7.6 billion, a nearly eightfold increase. We're still on a trajectory that is not in control. While most of the world has a diminishing fertility rate, Africa's fertility rate remains extraordinarily high. And Africa, on the current trajectory, is on a path to reach 4 billion people by 2100. I do not recommend it. This would be devastating for Africa's well-being in an era of climate change, water scarcity. Africa's largely dryland. It's got a narrow equatorial band of rainforest, but it's mostly arid and semi-humid, and it will be devastated by climate change if we don't get that under control. But try to put 4 billion people in sub-Saharan Africa sustainably, it cannot be done. And remember that the population of sub-Saharan Africa in 1950 was 179 million people. Now 1 billion, on its way to 4 billion. So we have a massive scale problem. That's not inevitable, by the way, those forecasts. What it says is keep girls in school, reduce the fertility rates rapidly, and don't have population reach anything like those numbers through the voluntary reduction of fertility that comes with education. And that's the real policy prescription of that. But the second megatrend is that we've reached the limits environmentally. As you know, we are at 1.1 degrees Celsius above the pre-industrial level already. We have, through the momentum of warming, another 0.2 or 0.3 of 1 degree C already built in to the emissions. Because remember, the oceans have not yet warmed to the level of greenhouse gases. We still have a net energy imbalance. We're still warming the planet. It takes a long time to heat up the world's bathtub. So we still have some built-in warming, even if we didn't emit anything more. And of course, we're still emitting 40 billion tons of CO2 per year. So we're on a trajectory that is still out of control. And what the scientists tell us is that it is only a fraction of 1 degree C more that will be most likely consistent with a mass destruction of the West Antarctic ice sheet and Greenland ice sheet. And the reason the scientists know that is that the last time Earth was a little bit warmer than now, less than 1 degree, was the previous interglacial period called the Eemian, 115,000 years ago, and the sea level, without doubt, was 8 meters higher than now. You can just go around beaches in the world and see from the stratigraphy where the sea level was in the last interglacial, 8 meters high, higher than now, which really annoys me because I live on a small island economy called Manhattan, and it would be underwater, and I don't have a boat. We're going to destroy so much of the world's habitable areas the way we're going right now. So this past year has been another disaster. In 3 back-to-back mega hurricanes in our part of the world, we had $260 billion of loss in 4 days of storm. And in Puerto Rico, the U.S. is so incompetent these days, and so uncaring, by the way, which it is, that we can't even turn the electricity back on months after this storm, because this is a colony of the United States, and imperial powers don't treat their colonies very nicely. And so Puerto Rico, they don't have electricity. What difference does it make? And so we're months afterwards. The emergency relief has been pulled out, and they have blackouts. They just had, San Juan had a blackout a couple of days ago. They still have 1/3 of the population without any electricity since the storm itself in September. And of course, we had $18 billion of forest fire loss from the drought that hit California. I don't want to complain about the U.S. Damages because every part of the world's experiencing them. I'm saying that even the rich countries are so vulnerable to this, we had $300 billion of hydrometeorological losses this past year, setting all records. But our dingbat president doesn't get it. It doesn't matter how many times we're hit. And we cannot dignify someone like Trump because people like this have our lives in their hands. So it's disgusting, actually, that we have this loss, this amount of suffering, and we have a president in the hands of the oil and gas industry in incredibly corrupt politics in the United States, where David and Charles Koch and ExxonMobil and Chevron pay the bills of our Republican senators and congressmen, and that's why they spout the nonsense that they do. And Trump, I'm not sure. It may just because nonsense always comes out of his mouth. But the others are not so stupid. They're just so incredibly corrupt. And that's really a terrible problem. And in India, you're reaching 50 degrees C each year. You cannot live in 50 degrees C. And the evidence is that it's going up, and the massive heat waves are surely going to get worse and more frequent. These are killers, as you know. This is not inconvenience. This is death. You're going to lose a large part of one of the most densely populated parts of the whole planet to uninhabitability at the rate that we're going. So, let me sneak in a little good news. Maybe good news. We have the most wondrous technologies to address these issues now. And as we just walked around the yard to see the exhibitions, there's so many exciting things happening. We're really strange. As stupid as we are as a species, some are really smart. And if you read any week of Science or Nature magazine, which I like to do when it arrives on Friday, it's unbelievable the quality of thinking that the scientific community continues to advance week by week. So there are real solutions to this. But the divide between the knowledge world and the political world is unbelievable and getting wider. We've never had a dumber president than we have now, or a mentally more unstable president than we have right now. And yet we've never had better science and technology as well. And the United States, it's an incredible country, by the way, because we have 3,000 colleges and universities, and you go to any of them, and I travel to these campuses all the time, places I've never even heard of before I arrive. And they're wonderful faculties, so sophisticated, that could solve the problems in their communities in a snap of a finger. Great engineers, great scientists, great climatologists. But then you look at Washington, and it's just drenched in money. Corrupt money, I mean. Because our campaigns are $7, $8 billion right now. It's the loss of democracy. Because our Supreme Court was corrupted enough to say that corporate secret money is free speech. Do not do this at home, please. For the 30-some countries here, the United States lost it. We're trying to fight to get it back. But the information revolution allows, with the advances of connectivity, with the advances of computation power, with the quantum computers likely to be coming soon, with the nanotechnologies, and we just saw bio-nanotechnologies outside for advanced agronomy. Renewable energy becomes cost-effective. Of course, electric vehicles become cost-effective. Precision agriculture becomes cost-effective. The things that can be done now are astounding if we have governments that understand mobilized science and technology, and not just for war purposes, but for human purposes. One of the smartest things that put the U.S. in a great situation for decades was in 1944, towards the end of World War II, Franklin Roosevelt wrote to his science advisor, Vannevar Bush, a letter that's astounding in its wisdom. And he said in the letter, "We have developed so much science during the war. I'm writing to you to give me proposals how we make it available for civilian use after the war." Almost any president of any country would have said, we have so much science, how do we keep it secret to keep our military advantage? But Franklin Roosevelt was our greatest president in history, by far. And he had the idea, let us move this for civilian use. And Vannevar Bush wrote a brilliant, transformative book in 1945 called Science, the Endless Frontier, which was in response to Roosevelt's inquiry. And he said, what should we do? We should establish new civilian science foundations, which became the National Science Foundation. We should have biomedical research, which became the National Institutes of Health. We should have funding for poor children so that they can go to university, because Bush said, no doubt, in poor families there are great scientific geniuses budding, but they'll never be able to afford university unless the government helps them to do it. So the U.S. invested very heavily in science, technology, and higher education. That's what made the U.S. a special country for 50 years, plus all the immigrants that came in. Because Hitler gave the U.S. the greatest scientific establishment imaginable, because the German scientific establishment, who were the greatest physicists in the world, including Albert Einstein, all arrived to the United States, those that survived. That's what made America great, not the idiot, make America great again, cut the budget, slash education, slash science, speak nonsense, go to the pollutants, let the Koch brothers run the show nonsense that we have right now. It's going to take us a while to get out of this, ladies and gentlemen. That's why India's leadership's really important. I'm not being rude to the United States. I'm giving you accurate information, which is you better lead. Don't follow the example, say, oh, we get to be a mess too. Because you have to compensate for the American failures now. And you should open up your endless frontiers now of science and technology. That's a good place to spend the money, because the social returns are absolutely phenomenal. One part of this is notable, which is that the information technologies will take away jobs of low-skilled workers. Agriculture is going to be all mechanized sometime this century. It already is in the United States. The farmers that I talk to don't farm anymore. The tractors farm as autonomous driving. One farmer told me that he still likes to sit on the tractor, but he reads a book while he does so. Because the machines can do everything, and they even, of course, are using GPS to know precisely where to deposit what mix of the fertilizers. So the jobs will go away. And that requires also a lot of attention to what kind of new skills, what kind of training, also to redistribution of income. Right now, all of our income is going to Tim Cook, Larry Page, Sergey Brin, Bill Gates, and a few others. And the 5 big companies, Apple, Amazon, Google, Facebook, and Microsoft, are now worth about $3.6 trillion. And they don't have very many people working for them. So the money is all going to the machines. Bill Gates is recycling his money for global public health, which is wonderful. The others, not so much yet. That is something important I'll come back to. But what did we do with these companies? We cut their taxes in December because Donald Trump's profound sympathies go to billionaires. So he's really very attentive to the needs of billionaires, but not at all to the needs of people who are struggling. The opposite. The more he can hurt them, it seems to me, the better he feels. Because there are killers and there are losers, he was told early on. And so I point this out, this decline of the labor share of income shown here in the United States, to say India will face it too. You have to be careful to not let inequality run out of control. And that's part of normal good governance. The winner of good governance in the world is Norway and your neighbors, Sweden and Denmark, the lowest income inequality in the world. Because Scandinavia figured out about 100 years ago that the right way to live was decently. And they invented what they call social democracy, which is far and away the best system of governance in the world. And they tax a lot, and they redistribute a lot, and everybody is happy. And how do I know? Because when we do the World Happiness Report every year, of which I'm a co-editor, they're the top of the world. So it's objectively true. People like to pay taxes and then get good public services. And that's the Scandinavian model. So I mentioned that. Now, fourth is we've agreed on something globally, ladies and gentlemen. And that is we have agreed on sustainable development as our framework. This is crucial. Tell everybody you know about that, because they don't know. They've never heard of this. But tell them about the Sustainable Development Goals. Tell them about the Paris Climate Agreement. It was the 8 greatest weeks of diplomacy that we had in 20 years in the world. From September 25th, 2015 to December 12th, 2 times the world agreed on a framework unanimously. Donald Trump says we're going to get out of the Paris Agreement. Don't believe it, by the way. He'll be gone before the US is gone. Honestly, we're not going to let it happen. It's just lobbying nonsense. It's corruption nonsense. These are global agreements, and they're truly important. And the Sustainable Development Goals are basically a pathway to decency. That's all they are. End poverty, ensure universal access to health care, ensure universal access to quality education, ensure low-carbon energy systems, and the like. Norway has fulfilled just about everything except goal number 13. Which is to finally decarbonize, but it is it's the Tesla capital of the world, Oslo. So it's going to be an all-electric, zero-emitting country very soon, actually. That's what we all have to become. And that's what the Sustainable Development Goals call on us to do. So what are the specifics that we need to do? Here's my quick list, and I'll come back to a 5th trend in just a moment. First, we need to decarbonize the energy system. That's for everybody. The rule is by 2050, we have to be out of the fossil fuel business. Why? Because that is what's necessary to achieve the Paris climate goals. We have to decarbonize by mid-century. That's everybody. That's also Statoil. That is ExxonMobil. That's Chevron. That is Saudi Aramco. That is your national coal industry. That is all of the internal combustion engine vehicles. Though we saw outside some biomass to diesel, that would be okay at a small scale, so there could be a niche for some ICE. But basically, we need to get out of the internal combustion engine. It was great from 1870 to 2020, and now we have to move to electric vehicles. And produce electric vehicles, please. in India. I hope Tesla survives. I hope European producers. Otherwise, we're just going to be driving Chinese electric vehicles, because there's no doubt they're going to be producing them inexpensively and with high quality and in mass volume, because that's the national strategy right now in China. So first is decarbonization. What is India's plan for decarbonization? You can't do this without a plan. It's not just small microgrids, or even off-grid, that's fine. But the large transformation is the on-grid system. So how is India going to go from 85% fossil fuel based to decarbonization and still have rapid economic development? That requires a strategy. There are good papers online you can find for how India can be 100% renewable by 2050, because offshore wind, onshore wind, solar power, hydroelectric provides a vast store of energy. Nuclear can provide low carbon energy, zero carbon energy as well. But where is the plan? You need a plan. There's no magic of the market in this. You need a strategy to go from here to 2050, the fastest transformation of energy systems ever attempted to get out of carbon. And it's not picking on India. Every country has to do this, Ghana too. We need a full decarbonization of the world economy. Second is, in order to accomplish that, we need transboundary infrastructure. Of course, India brings in hydro from Nepal, from Bhutan, for example. But in New York City, we're going to have to use upper northern Quebec hydropower exactly the same way. And instead of building a wall on the Mexican border, we should be building transmission lines from high-quality solar energy in Sonora State to the population centers of the southwest of the United States. It's a no-brainer. Why do I emphasize transboundary? Because every country has to make peace with its neighbors. This is a rule of sustainable development. India will not achieve sustainable development if it's in a state of war with Pakistan. Because you need to connect infrastructure, you need to partner, you need to be able to develop the resources together. Most of these wars go back to choosing sides in the Cold War, or misunderstandings, or the failure to resolve a specific territorial dispute that is now 70 years old. These problems need to be solved, or they're going to solve us. They will devastate us in the end. And all of this, and remember, the rule from the Roman Empire to the British Empire to the American Empire is divide and conquer. And so the American Empire's pushing at every division everywhere. It wants to take a side. We're against Iran, we're for Saudi. You can't even tell the difference. Americans couldn't name one city in these countries. But we know that we're for one and against the other, though we can't remember which. Because it's imperial strategy. It has no basis in reality, and it's extremely dangerous from the point of view of sustainable development. Third is we need directed technological change. And that means Vannevar Bush's vision in 1945 needs to be a global vision, which is that we have wonderful technology, we need to direct it towards sustainable land use, towards sustainable energy systems, towards low-cost, high-quality rural education, towards delivery of healthcare services, new diagnostic tests, new smart machines that mean we don't even need doctors in places because the diagnostics, the imaging, and other systems can be used. Fourth is we need global land use strategy, and I was thrilled to get this morning a new report by the UN Convention to Combat Desertification, on land use. Land use is an incredibly complicated topic. Why? Because it implicates the carbon balance, biodiversity, food production, water use, human settlements, human livelihoods. And it's very hard to keep all of the different concerns in mind. So agronomists just want to grow food. They don't care about biodiversity typically. Or the biodiversity conservationists just want to conserve, but they don't necessarily care about the people on the land that are farming right now. So this is a wonderful report. I just haven't read it all because I just got it 10 minutes ago before I started, but it's exactly the right analytical framework. We need, the fourth area, we need global land use strategy. And it's not even good enough within a country, because what's happening is that global demand for food is wrecking the Amazon. Global demand for palm oil is destroying Indonesian, Malaysian ecosystems. That's coming from abroad. China's insatiable demand for tropical hardwoods is leading to clear cutting of forests all across Southeast Asia. And so we need global strategies for conservation and land use. Fifth is we need resources. We need about $3 to $4 trillion a year to invest in the Sustainable Development Goals. It's not a lot of money, because it's about 3 to 4% of our global output per year. We're so rich that the IMF puts the annual production right now at about $130 trillion annual. So what's 3 to 4 trillion among friends? Not very much. And for development assistance, maybe $300 to $400 billion a year, much less than 1% of world output. So this is all quite normal. And we're spending nearly $2 trillion a year on military. The U.S. wasted, not just wasted, the U.S. spent $5 trillion on the wars in Afghanistan and Syria and Iraq. To do what? Nothing of any positive outcome. So if you can waste $5 trillion for nothing, you can spend a few trillion dollars for sustainable development. It's not a lot, but we need to raise it. Sixth is regional governance. I'm coming to an end. And 7 is global governance. Let me say a word about that. We have 5 UN regions. I'm a UN official part-time, I have full-time, but $1 a year for the Secretary General of the United Nations. And it's my proudest role. I love the UN. I think it's our hope to not blow ourselves to smithereens and to actually achieve sustainable development. And the UN divides the world's regions like this in the technical division. I like this map because the green, you guys, suggests that rather than the competition between the two giants, there is a region of Asia. It's the center of the world population. It's becoming the center of the world economy. It would be great to work together as a region. China's made a proposal, the Belton Road Initiative. I'm a huge fan of this idea, because the idea is to build infrastructure that connects Eurasia. Of course, it needs to be sustainable infrastructure, but immediately it was viewed, the US, oh, we can't join that, that's China's initiative. And there are many doubts and so forth. It should not be viewed in a competitive Cold War mentality. It should be viewed as an opportunity for true regional integration, peace, and sustainable infrastructure. These are regional organizations, and you see SAARC, and SAARC includes India and Pakistan and Bangladesh and other countries. And it would just be wonderful. I know it's a little bit of a dream, but good cooperation in the SAARC neighborhood would make this region so much more productive, so much more dynamic, so much safer, so much more sustainable. So I'm really a big believer in neighborhoods, because I tell you as an economist, it's the core logic that you trade with your neighbors, you build infrastructure with your neighbors, but instead the militarists think about going to war with your neighbors. But that's exactly the mindset that we have to overcome. Final word. I was honored by Secretary General Ban Ki-moon 6 years ago when he asked me to help establish a global network of universities and think tanks, of which TERI is one of our profoundly esteemed members, and for which I'm grateful. The idea of Ban Ki-moon was, can you help bring knowledge to bear so that when we're done with the negotiations over the proposed SDGs, because they had just been proposed at that point, we can actually have the knowledge to implement them. We now have about 600 think tanks and universities around the world. We have TERI heading what I hope will become a vibrant chapter for South Asia, one that can bring cooperation across the countries of this region. My idea is that more than ever in human history, we need to use our heads. Of course, we need to use our hearts as well. We need to overcome fear. We need to overcome demagoguery. We need to overcome us versus them mentality, which is very deep-seated in human nature. We have to have the idea that we're all in this together, and we're going to have to use our best brains to find the way forward. Thank you very much.